Welcome to Vanadium. I'm Chris Rankin. The more I learn about this mad world, the more mysterious it seems. There are nearly 100,000 different species of plants identified in the Amazon rainforest. A fair number of them would kill, sicken, or liquefy the insides of anyone who tried to eat them. Most species aren't very distinctive, and most are difficult to tell apart from one another. The Amazon basin is just coated with different species of brown vine and green leaf. This is one of the things at the heart of the mystery of the magic hallucinatory potion known as ayahuasca. Somehow, over 1,000 years ago, pre-technological people, without any knowledge of modern botany or pharmacology, just so happened to select just the right two plants out of the entire Amazon jungle. Two plants that don't even grow near one another. The ayahuasca brew requires just the right two species of plants to work together in synergy to produce the legendary psychedelic effect. Neither will work without the other. The vine, Banisteriopsis caapi, with the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or MAOI action, and the leaf, Psychotria viridis, which requires that MAOI action in order to make the dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, it contains orally active. How did the Amazon tribes figure this out a millennium ago? For these people, ayahuasca's discoverers, Banisteriopsis caapi is called the vine of the dead. The legend is that the Amazonians' deceased relatives would come back from the dead to show them which trees to climb to find the right vine required for the potion. The ghosts would also take the men out in the jungle to identify the necessary DMT-containing leaf and instruct them how to boil the ingredients together into the active concoction. Among people like the Napa Runa and Pastaza Runa in Ecuador, ayahuasca is considered a mediator and translator between the human and plant worlds. Ayahuasca can have very different uses depending on the culture. Some cultures do it for shamanic purposes, but in other cases it's consumed just socially among friends and family. Sometimes it's used to enhance the study of the natural environment or to gain wisdom or personal insight. Some even use it to astral project and visit friends and family far away. Evidence of ayahuasca use dates back more than 1,000 years. This was demonstrated by analysis of artifacts found in a cave in Bolivia in 2010. Researchers discovered a bundle containing the residue of ayahuasca ingredients and various other preserved shamanic substances. In the 16th century, Christian missionaries from Spain first encountered South Americans using ayahuasca. The missionaries naturally reported this as the work of the devil. Since then, the potion has been the subject of chemical and pharmacological research. In the 20th century, the active chemical of the caapi vine was isolated and originally named telepethine. Then the tryptamine component was identified by scientists. And it didn't take long for the ayahuasca recipe to escape the lab and go worldwide. People who have consumed ayahuasca in the modern West report having mystical experiences and deep revelations regarding their purpose on Earth, the nature of the universe, and how they can better themselves. Some have described it as a near-death experience, or rebirth. Many have gone on the record to report contact with higher planes and extra-dimensional beings acting as guides and healers. Experiments have shown the DMT component of ayahuasca may encourage the production of new neurons in the hippocampus. Some test subjects even perform better on memory tasks compared to a placebo-controlled group. Ayahuasca has also been shown to be very effective for the treatment of addictions, with much lower addiction severity index scores seen in users of ayahuasca compared to controls. Future research may lead to treatments for other psychiatric and neurological disorders. The ayahuasca experience itself, however, is no walk in the park. Vomiting usually follows ingestion. This is considered by many shaman and experienced users to be a purging and an essential part of the experience. It's supposed to represent the release of negative energy and emotions built up over the course of life. Ayahuasca can also cause significant emotional and psychological distress. Depending on dosage, some other undesirable effects include tremors, nausea, diarrhea, hyperthermia, autonomic instability, sweating, and motor function impairment. Some fatalities have been reported due to the use of ayahuasca. Some of the deaths were due to pre-existing heart conditions and interactions with other drugs, mostly antidepressants. Mixing MAOIs and SSRIs is a recipe for disaster. A couple of other notes. A diet low in the amino acid tyramine is recommended in the days leading up to ingestion. There's some speculation of an interaction between tyramine and the MAOIs that could lead to a hypertensive crisis. Concerning more psychological safety, many ayahuasca adventurers choose to go it alone. In general though, shamans, curanderos, and experienced users advise against consuming ayahuasca without the oversight of well-trained experts. The shamans typically lead the ceremonial consumption of the ayahuasca beverage in a rite that typically takes place over the entire night. However, not every expert is to be trusted. There are reports of brujos, witches, and assorted criminals enticing tourists to drink ayahuasca under their guidance for all manner of nefarious purpose. One way to research ayahuasca is to read the experience reports from those who have taken sometimes massive doses of the stuff, some from users with dozens of experiences under their belt. Erowid.org is a great cultivated resource with experience reports. Here's an example from the site with someone who took a very large dose of ayahuasca. This was written by Mind Explorer, and it was published on the site in 2012, and it's called Life-Changing Encounter with the Other, an Experience with Ayahuasca. I decided to fast for 30 hours before participating in the ceremony. I knew that vomiting was inevitable, and I had been told that fasting would give me a stronger experience. I had pretty bad altitude sickness because I had just arrived from Cusco, which has an elevation of over 3,000 feet, so it wasn't hard to fast. At sunset, we took an old-school Volkswagen Beetle up to the top of one of the hills surrounding Cusco. We entered a fairly spacious hut. 3 bed mats with plenty of blankets were lined up in front of an altar. I remember having a conversation with the curandero while he was preparing for the long night ahead. I distinctly remember him saying, "Ayahuasca no es un droga. Ayahuasca es la medicina." That resounded with me. He began the ceremony by lighting a candle inside of a large frame with holes running along the sides. This gave the room an eerie glow as the candle flickered and projected shadows along the walls. He then proceeded to fill his mouth with coca leaves, tucking them under his lip as he chanted a ritual song. Tobacco and coca are considered sacred to the curanderos, for they allow contact with the spirits. He then pulled out an empty plastic water bottle filled with some dark fluid, the ayahuasca. He blessed the ayahuasca with a prayer, then blew over the top of the bottle before pouring the liquid into a small ceramic glass. He handed each of us one to drink. Then he gave us individual blessings by blowing tobacco smoke all over us. He told me to drink it all at once. It tasted like some strong, exotic, bitter wine, but it wasn't nearly as disgusting as I had expected. I was pleased by this. The purge happened after about 20 minutes. It didn't last long. After I was certain that all of the ayahuasca had left me, I got uncomfortable and laid down. There were some windows on the thatched roof which allowed me to see the night sky. When I closed my eyes, I began to see geometrical patterns, fractals actually, all across my visual field. Then I felt a presence, as if I was surrounded by dozens of people. They were a comfort to me, to calm me down, and I began to feel wonderful. I heard, or possibly felt, a woman assure me that everything was going to be okay, and she beckoned to me to come with her into the spirit world. She felt very motherly, which evokes images of Mother Earth, or Pachamama, as they say in Quechua. Then a red light appeared which jolted me up. The curandero was staring straight at me, and then he asked me, "You okay?" He would ask me that question throughout the entire night. It's actually a joke I still have with one of my friends who was there with me. Even when I was uncontrollably hallucinating, I would still respond, "See?" It almost amused me because I would have to think about it for a few seconds. Am I okay? I always was, and I'm very glad he would ask. There were some difficult situations that he helped me through later that night. Ayahuasca should never be used without a shaman. The ayahuasquero played sacred songs, ancient songs, beautiful in their own right, but not comparable to everything I'd heard before, except for maybe the chanting of the Hasidic rabbis. He used drums and flutes and vocal intonations to guide our experiences. The shaman uses these auditory signals purposefully to evoke visual imagery within the participants. The songs, or Icarus, convey information, stories about their ancestors. My visions would consist of jungles and jaguars and hunts and feasts and people, and it reminded me of the Torah, just the jungle version of it. For hours, he was consistently able to provoke this imagery. I believe this may represent a novel form of communication that has yet to be studied by modern science. It's worthy of investigation. During the first 3 to 4 hours, I came in direct contact with multiple hyperdimensional entities, also known as spirits or angels. However, there were many different types of entities I encountered, and the differences must be addressed in order to understand the phenomenon. Some spirits had human qualities, which ranged from ordinary to powerful shaman. I remember one entity had a very strong presence. The ayahuasquero became silent, and the candle began flickering furiously when the spirit entered the room. Many of the spirits would enter my body, and I could feel them. I felt like most of them were healing me, although some would speak to me in exotic languages that I couldn't understand. Some of the spirits were not human at all, and if I were to guess, I would say they were plant spirits. I could just tell. Some spirits seemed like they were responsible for our existence, as if they played a role in the unfolding of the present moment. At first, my reaction to these spirits was that this was ridiculous, that they must be hallucinations. But after an hour of observing them and scrutinizing them, I came to the rational, semi-empirical conclusion that they were real. They passed all my cognitive tests for what spirits would actually look like if they were real. By that I mean they were far stranger than anything I could have ever imagined to be real. However, I must stress that there are no words adequate in describing them, and most of them were not necessarily seen in the traditional sense. It's just one of the many things that will sound ludicrous to somebody reading this, but would make perfect sense if you were actually experiencing it. At some point, I realized that my experience was over. It went by too quickly. I hadn't seen my spirit animal. I hadn't had an out-of-body experience. I hadn't felt the presence of God. I had just interacted with these spirits that just showed me random shit. That was it. But what insights had I gained? It was a cool experience and all, but not the most profound experience of my life. I was a little disappointed. However, the ayahuasquero noticed this. He laughed and said I could always drink one more. He said I would fully enter the spirit world if I drank more. I was a little nervous about that prospect and went into the bathroom to fully think it over. In the end, I realized that I might not have the opportunity to do this again. I drank the second glass of ayahuasca. I had no idea what was about to happen. While I was waiting for the ayahuasca to take effect, I could hear what sounded like a few dozen dogs right outside our hut. In Cusco, dogs travel in packs. They aren't confined to the backyards of their owners. They began to growl, and soon a huge fight broke out between two of the dogs. The intensity of this situation, with over a dozen dogs barking and growling at one another, made me feel extremely uncomfortable. Then the purge happened, and I was immediately catapulted into the psychedelic realm. I kept on thinking to myself, why did I drink it again? This is too powerful. What is happening to me? Where did the spirits go? Why is the shaman silent? I heard this loud noise, like somebody was turning a knob inside of my head that controlled all of the possible frequencies of sound. I also began to enter these extraordinarily visual realms, and then immediately forgot what happened. Visions were flowing so fast that I couldn't comprehend anything. However, the experience came in waves, and when I was aware enough to think about my situation, I realized that I was experiencing my subconscious. I began to analyze myself, and I felt like I was at the cusp of realizing what a thought was. Then I realized it was a paradox. How can a thought be used to understand what thoughts are? I had also had many personal realizations about life, my family, and myself. I understood that our time on Earth was finite. At some point, the dogs stopped fighting, and I became calm again. I laid down and looked through the roof at the stars. At this point, I could understand the dogs. Communication with animals is definitely possible. That sounds really weird, but I could literally understand and emphasize on a deep emotional level the information that the dogs were conveying in their howls. This sparked profound realizations. I realized that on a fundamental level, all conscious entities were the same. The only differences between our consciousness and the consciousness of dogs were merely different wavelengths within a greater medium. Upon this realization, my vision became engulfed with a white light. The light was so bright and beautiful that I began to uncontrollably cry. I knew that I was experiencing the same white light people describe upon death. It was the source of all consciousness. It was omnipresent, eternal, and about as close to a description of God as you can get. This must be God. I understood how all life and the universe was connected by fractals in this hyperdimensional membrane. I felt like my soul had connected to an ocean made of light, and tears flowed down my cheeks as I saw the entire universe, galaxies and all. I could feel the ayahuasca coursing through my veins. I noticed that I couldn't feel my hands. My body slowly became numb. I accepted God and all of His glory and prayed that I would be safe. There were no entities to guide me at this time. Very soon, I had no body. I just was, complete and utter transcendence. But I could still see, which puzzled me because I had no eyes. I actually began to float out of my body and into the room. I could see my lifeless body laying down with my hands across my chest. I could see the shaman and my two friends crouched in the fetal position. But there was also this violet light, and it seemed to be coming out of my body. The room was filled with this light. I wasn't scared because I knew that out-of-body experiences are common on ayahuasca, but I never thought it would feel this real. The realization that I had become some sort of hyperdimensional entity freaked me out. What if I never returned to my body? Was I dead? Immediately, I returned back to my body after thinking those thoughts. I was filled with relief that I was alive, and regret that I hadn't gone further into the spirit realm. However, my body was still fairly numb, and raising my hands gave me the sensation of flying through some eternal realm. Ayahuasca is gentle. The effects just slowly taper off, and there's a calm afterglow. I had no desire to return to that realm. I got what I had come for. It's amazing how quickly you forget what the experience was like. Within a few hours, I didn't even have the ability to imagine what I had just felt. My strong convictions about the existence of God and spirits declined. But at the same time, I knew that while I was experiencing it, my core self was there. I trust myself, and I trust my judgment, even on ayahuasca. I realized that there was legitimacy in spirituality. Even if God doesn't exist, I know that God is a perception that people have the potential to have. At least the stories aren't completely based in bullshit. I feel like ayahuasca prepares you for death as well. I am no longer afraid of death. We will all eventually die. It takes away the mystery, allows you to at least imagine what the afterlife might be like. What's the point of believing nothing happens after death anyway? It's just depressing. Reflecting on my experience, I'm no longer the same person. First of all, the ayahuasca literally did heal me of certain gastrointestinal discomforts I had since the first grade. I feel much more in touch with my body as well. I no longer drink alcohol. I have absolutely no desire to use drugs for temporary pleasure. I exercise on a daily basis. I feel as if my life actually has a purpose, and I can't waste any more time. I need to live in the moment and have just as many experiences as I can. I've never felt more happy and consistent and content with my life. I'm excited about what's to come, about where my life's journey will take me next. There is still so much we have left to learn. We can never forget that. Mind explorer's experience is common among those who ingest the ayahuasca potion. This isn't like getting drunk on bourbon. For most, it's inspiring, life-affirming, or even life-changing. The question that immediately occurs to me is, why do Western cultures treat plant medicines with such ignorance and disrespect, even in the face of so many reports and scientific evidence? Why do we lock people up who explore their minds? Could it be because so much of the dynamics of our society depend on us feeling bad, depend on us being divorced to the beauty and extraordinary nature of life? Could be to help convince us that we're nothing, and this all means nothing. Maybe people who feel like that are easier to control and manipulate. Maybe people who feel this way represent less of a threat to power. This theory seems a bit paranoid, I admit, but I think the evidence is mounting on my side. And if I'm right, could there be a worse crime to perpetrate on a society? Thank you very much. This was Chris Rankin with Vanadium.